Hello friends, today we're diving into a fascinating question from the book of Genesis that has puzzled many for centuries. Who was Cain's wife? This question invites us to explore the early chapters of the Bible with a heart full of faith and an open mind to the mysteries of God's creation. Let's explore this together in the spirit of curiosity and discovery. In Genesis 4, we read about Cain, the firstborn son of Adam and Eve, who becomes infamous for the tragic murder of his brother Abel. After this event, Cain is banished to wander the earth. However, in Genesis 4:17 it mentions that Cain had a wife and that she bore him a son named Enoch. This naturally leads us to ask, where did Cain find his wife? The Bible does not specifically say who Cain's wife was. The only possible answer is that Cain's wife was his sister or niece or great-niece. The Bible does not say how old Cain was when he killed Abel, Genesis 4:8, but they both were likely full-grown adults. Adam and Eve surely had given birth to more children than just Cain and Abel at the time Abel was killed. They definitely had many more children later, Genesis 5:4. The fact that Cain was scared for his own life after he killed Abel, Genesis 4:14, indicates that there were likely many other children and perhaps even grandchildren of Adam and Eve living at that time. Cain's wife, Genesis 4:17, was a daughter or granddaughter of Adam and Eve. Since Adam and Eve were the first and only human beings, their children would have no other choice than to intermarry. This might seem unusual to us today, but it was a necessity for the early human race to multiply and fill the earth. God did not forbid interfamily marriage until much later, when there were enough people to make intermarriage unnecessary, Leviticus 18:6-18. You see, friends, the reason that incest today often results in genetic abnormalities is that when two people of similar genetics, like a brother and sister, have children together, there is a high risk of their recessive characteristics becoming dominant. However, when people from different families have children, it is highly unlikely that both parents will carry the same recessive traits. The human genetic code has become increasingly damaged over the centuries as genetic defects are multiplied, amplified, and passed down from generation to generation. Adam and Eve were perfectly designed by God, and their lack of genetic defects enabled them and the first few generations of their descendants to have a greater quality of health than we do now. When sin entered the world through Adam and Eve's disobedience to God, it brought sickness, disease, and a compromised bloodline for all their descendants. Their children had few, if any, genetic mutations, therefore they could intermarry safely. But who was Cain's wife? Cain's wife was likely his sister or a close relative. The Bible in Genesis 5:4 indicates that Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters. Given that Adam and Eve were the first humans, their children would have had to marry each other to propagate the human race. This understanding aligns with the fact that Cain, after being banished for killing Abel, feared for his life, suggesting there were already numerous descendants of Adam and Eve, Genesis 4:14. Thus, it is most plausible that Cain married one of his sisters or possibly a niece, reflecting the necessity of close relative marriages in humanity's earliest generations. While the Bible does not provide the name of Cain's wife, extra-biblical texts like the Book of Jubilees name her as Awan, a daughter of Eve. This book, written between 135 and 105 BCE, is not part of the canonical Bible but offers intriguing details about early biblical figures. According to this tradition, Cain married Awan, and their union led to the birth of Enoch. Why would God allow siblings to marry? In the early stages of humanity, Adam and Eve were created perfect, without genetic flaws. This perfection meant that early human offspring did not suffer from the genetic disorders that might arise from such unions today. The necessity of these early marriages was to fulfill God's command to be fruitful and multiply, Genesis 1:28. If you are enjoying this video, please like it. Why doesn't the Bible mention more about Cain's wife? The Bible often focuses on individuals who are critical to the narrative or genealogical records. This selective mentioning means that many other children of Adam and Eve are not named or detailed. In the ancient world, genealogical records typically highlighted key figures who played significant roles in the unfolding story of God's people. As a result, lesser-known family members, especially females, were often omitted unless they had a direct impact on the primary narrative. Therefore, Cain's wife, being a necessary but not pivotal character, remains unnamed in the biblical text. What does the Bible say about incest? In the early days of humanity, marriages between close relatives were necessary for human propagation and were not considered sinful. This was because Adam and Eve, created directly by God, were genetically perfect, without the defects that could cause issues in later generations. The Bible does not initially condemn these unions. It wasn't until the time of Moses that God explicitly forbade such marriages, Leviticus 18:6-18. By then, the human population had grown enough to make interfamily marriages unnecessary, and genetic mutations had become more prevalent, making close relative marriages potentially harmful. Why would God allow this? Initially, there were no other humans besides Adam and Eve and their immediate offspring. For humanity to grow and fulfill God's command, to be fruitful and multiply, Genesis 1:28, intermarriage among siblings and close relatives was essential. At this early stage, genetic defects were not an issue due to the perfection of Adam and Eve's creation. It was only after generations of sin and its corrupting effects that genetic mutations became significant, necessitating the later prohibitions against close relative marriages found in the Mosaic Law. Thus, these early unions were a practical and divinely sanctioned solution to ensure the growth of the human population. The question of Cain's wife invites us to trust in God's plan, even when we don't have all the details. It's a reminder that our faith journey involves embracing the mysteries of God's creation with an open heart and mind. As we reflect on these early chapters of Genesis, let's remember that our quest for understanding brings us closer to God's wisdom. Each question we explore deepens our faith and our appreciation for the divine plan laid out in the Bible. If this exploration resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if this message touched your heart, comment Amen below. Bible Short Stories signing off.